welcome everybody. My name's Marina Pullin, and you have to forgive my nasally sound. I am an Australian, so I already have a nasally accent, but I'm also recovering from the flu, so it's probably worse than ever. So I sound sort of like a caricature of an Australian at the moment. But I wanted to, say hi. I'm really excited to be here discussing my two favourite things, being people and technology. And I think we can all agree, that both the movement and the changes within people and the changes in technology are going through huge changes across the world right now. And I guess for us, we're all pretty privileged to be alive at this point, to be witnessing it. And today's session, I think, is a real privilege to be able to deliver, where we bring together some elements of people and some of the challenges that we're seeing in digital transformation. Just by background, I work for an Australian learning and development company called MCBI, and we're a very new and proud partner of PECB, and delighted to be here at the PECB Connect session and to be able to get to know some of you and hopefully provide a little bit of insight around a topic that will resonate with you and help you professionally. So, shall we begin? Let's get going. All right. Just before we begin, I thought it might be sort of fun, or certainly help me as your facilitator for the next hour or so, to encourage a bit of interaction, where there'll be probably maybe 15, 20 of us, so certainly manageable. And I thought, if you're up for it, we could chat as we go over the next little while. But to do that, and I'll need you to actually practice on the chat on the webinar. So for those of you who are comfortable, I would love to hear where you're from and just a quick hello on the chat function. If you're there, you could just put a little message in that says, hey, hello, how are you? And you can actually say hi back to me. Lets me know that you're here. It's also a little small way that we can sort of interact as a group, and in some ways emulate or copy those amazing workshops that we know when you get to go face to face. Hello. Hey, Jason. Awesome. Thank you. I was starting to feel a little bit needy then, and a little bit awkward, like no one's going to say hello to me. Anyway, nice to meet you, Jason, from Melbourne, and I hope your weather is slightly warmer than it is here. I'm from Adelaide. Hey, Mark, from Adelaide. Well, nice to meet you. Nice to see you. Cool. All right, we'll just keep it going. We'll have some little chats. You're in Melbourne too. Great. I'll be over in Melbourne in a couple of weeks, so make sure the weather's better than it has been the last few times I've been over there. If you can, that'd be really great. Just order some nice weather. In terms of today's session, it is interactive. It's small enough to be able, for us to chat as we go. So please ask questions in the chat function if you wish, and in the chat function, I can keep an eye on it and ask and reply to you as we go. If there are formal questions or that we will tie up towards the end, feel free to pop it under that webinar, that section that says questions as well, but we will cover both. All right. The other thing with the chat, if we're going through these stories and something really resonates with you and you think, oh my God, that's me, or I don't agree, or whatever it is, I would absolutely love it if you could perhaps just interact and go, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds, yeah, great. Or I don't agree with it, whatever it is. Just anything we can do to sort of bridge the gap around these sort of online workshops would be much appreciated. In terms of the confidential stories, I'm going to tell you a few confidential stories. They'll be a little bit saucy, hopefully, to some of the most are self-deprecating, but you may be able to pick the clients that I'm referring to, most of them are global, and I'd be really grateful if you didn't race out and get on LinkedIn and say, oh my God, that bank. I'd be really, really grateful. And I will just tell you, I have added a couple of clients together for the purpose of a good story. So it won't be 100% accurate, but I'll try to make it as engaging so you learn something as you go. Just the last thing, just maybe for yourself as a moment of reflection, just trying to consider, what do you want to know, or what do you want to get out of today's session? And I know that's a It's a well-rehearsed phrase that we do in workshops, but it's a really powerful way to help your mind or your brain navigate towards a couple salient points and they're the things that you'll pick up on. And if you want, you can actually pop it in the chat and I will do my best to serve you and see if I can cover off a few things as we go. All right, you guys all right with that? That all sound okay? That's your cue to, you can actually, you can just say anything. For those of you who can use the chat function. All right, let's hop into the next part. All right, if you are like me, I'm definitely someone who likes to cut to the chase. I love going to webinars and podcasts, but the preamble does tend to drive me to skip to the intro, get through to the beginning part. So I thought we'd just get straight into a few juicy statistics to set the scene. So I thought what we would do is create a context around digital transformation. Start the conversation about the net worth of this incredible industry. These are US dollars. So the global digital transformation market around implementation and all the services that are going around it is being estimated at about $880 billion US, and it's increasing. So it's a huge area, and for those of you who have chosen a career in this, I think you're going to be well positioned for the next decade or so, because the global spending in this broad sector called digital transformation is looking to hit the $3.4 trillion by 2026. And there's a whole lot of forces behind that. And as lucrative as it is, and great for us in the sector, it's driven because of the velocity of change. And that velocity of change is making it really hard for us as individuals to be able to navigate this successfully. A lot of the organisations that are being surveyed, and these statistics have been taken from a combination of like Forbes and Pricewaterhouse and various other areas, but 74% of organisations are declaring to the market that they're saying that digital transformation is their top priority. Now, for those of you in the sector, you've probably picked up that tiny little comment of that's what they're declaring. They're saying this is a really big priority for us and they're investing. But through the course of this, through this little presentation, I think you'll find there's a few hurdles to how the actions are following through on the declared priority, which is making it pretty tricky for some of us professionals. Everyone has noticed how COVID has sped up these transformation initiatives, and it's not just increased the speed of DX or transformation, it's also the style of what's going on. COVID has been a catalyst for so many things, but it has fundamentally changed how we look at business models. So it's not just that, that was a big event. COVID has also changed the very core of many businesses, and everything like just from like working from home as an example, remote working has meant there's been a whole lot of stresses that many people are seeing as a way to be resolved by good tech solutions. We'll wait and see how that pans out. Most people have started on their digital transformation and they've declared it to the market. But the bad news is, for those of you who have a finance background, you've probably got a better chance of failing at a transformation around your declared success factors than you have on succeeding. Good news is, believe it or not, that 35% figure is up from 30%. So we do seem to be improving, or we're changing what our expectations are. The jury's out at the moment, but it is still an area that is fraught with lots of failure, lots of wasted money that's going on, and lots of confusion. But everyone's still really enthusiastic about it. You'll see, like, when you bundle those figures together, the real story is it's growing, everything's moving, we've got to change, but we're not really doing it as well as we can. So that's the sort of backdrop that we're playing in. So no wonder many of us feel like imposters. So it was against that. But I thought I came up with a little agenda for today. I'm going to wheel out a story of some blind men, and it was something from my career that meant a lot. And what I've elected to do, which may be a terrible failure, but I thought, on the internet, you can go onto the internet or you can go onto LinkedIn Learning and you can do lots of superficial training. There's lots of slogans, there's lots of high level things that talk to you about, the big themes around digital transformation. I thought today, if you're here and you have this feeling or you're attracted to this idea of being an imposter or resolving this feeling, why don't we go a little bit harder? So it's going to be a little bit detailed. At any point I lose you, just pop it in that chat and say, have no idea what you're talking about, because if you're thinking it, probably someone else is going to be thinking about that as well. But I'll just let you know, I thought we'd dive into a bit of like, because transformation, how you feel about it, is actually driven through a lot of detail. And then we'll play around with this idea of the imposter, something who's been my friend for most of my career. And then what we're going to be doing is just weaving in some of the benefits around the training that PECB offer, and also trying to create a linkage for you around this real power that comes with developing skills, just to improve your confidence and your performance. So it's not just a sales pitch, it's actually like a business pitch, if I could call it that. Are you guys all happy with that? Maybe on the chat, anyone from Australia, you can just give me a, yeah, that sounds okay. And if there's anyone thought of anything that you really want me to cover as well, just let me know, all right? I'll give you a second so we don't have that awkward second. That'll sound all right? Great. Okay. Perfect. Good. Awesome. All right. Let's, I'm going to credentialize myself a little bit. This isn't a bio that you're going to get pop quizzed or anything on, but I wanted to share with you the journey of my career, not in great detail or anything, but just in case it resonates with any of you. I've been a management consultant for about 25 years. I started over in re-engineering. So I'm a very left brain person, incredibly left brain. I found I had a bit of a talent for patterns, and probably because I have a maths background. And I was also very good at audit, at trying to look at where problems were. So after someone had done something, I would often, throughout my career, sort of found myself in positions where I would end up over in this thing called data reform or digital reform. So it was never at the front, the strategic part of it. It was always the fix-up stage. And I think that was actually quite a luxurious place to start the idea of strategy, because you weren't actually held accountable to build strategy. You were just fixing up someone else's. But I learned through that process that digital transformation, re-engineering, any of those large transformation efforts, that they're pretty much, the failures are pretty much well known. One is plans were rubbish, they weren't set correctly, skills of the people were some of the problems behind it. But also I found in those first parts of my career is that patterns, if you're willing to look at things, there were patterns everywhere. Patterns with people, how teams interacted, patterns in how commerce works, marketing, all of those different elements would come together. And once I got into that, and I thought, oh, okay, I can see these patterns. And don't worry, there were many, many moments I had the imposter feeling, thinking I shouldn't be here. It was at that point that I flipped and then became interested in actually building strategy. I sort of had my confidence up. And I'm not sure whether it was a great idea or not. There are probably lots of times I regretted it, but I found that building strategy and actually creating strategy around product design and doing all this other stuff was incredibly different. And it was very, very hard to do. It was very hard, much easier doing reform work than actually setting a direction. And I became humbled in the world of digital design. But I'll share with you a couple. I was lucky enough to have a mentor who navigated some of those, some of the issues for me, and he allowed me to embrace the maths and data background of me, my linear brain, helped me get some strategy work. I ended up getting a couple of awards, and then probably most recently was I ended up doing some AI work, and I was on SBS talking about whether it was whether it was a good thing for Australia or not. So it was good. Mark's just asked, I'd like to know why so many jump to transformation before looking at optimization. Great question. I should also share with you I'm a Six Sigma black belt, so I came from that world of optimization. I think, and now this is just my own personal view, Mark, but I think transformation is really sexy. It is always touted as being creative, and if you have an intro or an entrepreneurial nature and you're a bit forward thinking, it feels like it's the new frontier, and you're able to step over all the old yucky processes that don't work and build these great new visions for everyone. I think a lot of people are attracted to that. I think execution and implementation scares a lot of people off, though, particularly when you have a failure rate or a success rate of like 30%. I think it's and it's funny, as we get into architecture, you need to have both skills underneath your belt. Now, I mentioned I had a really great mentor throughout my career, and I was struggling, going, how does this work? The imposter syndrome was all over me. And I had this fellow, he sat me down, as most of us probably have in our career, have some person who's, been pivotal. And he decided to tell me the story of the blind men. Now, I'm sure many of you would be familiar with this story. But for those of you who haven't, let me do my best. I'll just do my best. I'll do the short tech version of this. The story of the elephant, the blind, the elephant isn't blind. It comes from a poem, and it's based on a Hindu parable. So this poem was written by a gentleman called John Godfrey Saxe back in 1816. And the story was based on this, it's the idea of collective wisdom. And it sort of goes a bit like this. So there's a bunch of the smartest, wise men in India, and they're unfortunately blind, but they're super smart, very, very wise men. And they're all like just being wise. I don't know what they do all day. They're just being wise, thinking things up, being creative, being amazing. And they're sitting in the jungle one day, and together they come across an elephant. So these guys are all experts in their respective areas. And they come across this elephant. They'd never, ever met an elephant before. And they all come up to the elephant, and they all lay hands gently on this elephant. And I always imagine what the elephant was thinking. But anyway, they start to go through and they try to describe to each other the animal that they have just described. Now, they're experts, right? They know what they're on about. So one grabs the leg of the elephant, and through their mindset and his awareness, he declared that this animal was like a tree. And he absolutely fervently said, it's a tree, it's a tree. Another one was busy grabbing the tusk and was saying, oh, this animal is like a spear. Another one had the ears and was saying it has a sail like a boat. Another one had a tail and was saying it's like a rope. And so it went on. And they were all touching this elephant at different points. And they were all very, very adamant that what they were seeing and what they were feeling and what they believed to be true was so true that they would end up arguing with each other. And they just kept arguing and arguing and arguing on it. And the moral of the story, that despite being experts, because they couldn't come together, they were all extremely right. We all recognise they were all right. Yes, it was right. But in that action of not collaborating and asking questions and respecting that there was actually a different thing in front of them, that they were all dangerously wrong. And it was that, and he and my mentor said to me many times, sometimes he would just say, look, it's an elephant issue here, right? And in digital transformation, particularly in 2024, that parable is very, very, very important to hold in our hearts, because this idea of transformation is complex. you've got to remember the transformations are not wildly successful. And we look at the statistics that are sitting behind the failure rates and what have you. And, you know, we're all in our little areas. We're not coming together and trying to understand the wholeness of the elephant. And made even more problematic by all the research that's coming out that a lot of the failures that we're seeing in transformations is skills-based. And you'll hear later on in this presentation that we actually have to unlearn an enormous amount of what we know about technology, HR, even some of the business strategy stuff has to be unlearned when we're looking at real big transformation. Now, that in itself, what's going on inside an elephant is tricky enough, but I think it's important to also point out that the external volatility and the expectations of how we're using tech from business leaders and shareholders and everyone is really creating a whole lot of pressure as well. This slide is directly from the PECB Digital Transformation Officer training, but you'll see these, just a handful of the tech that we're looking at these days is becoming, it's tricky to evaluate. It's just hard to go, will this work? We know we should do it, but how are we going to do it? What are the risks and all the different elements that we need to consider? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and I've been around for 25 years, what have you. I don't think we've ever seen this level of diversity and volatility and the level of uncertainty in business transformation ever. Ecosystems are all starting to blend with each other. Risk, all the different elements are starting to make it quite tricky. So that poor elephant is starting to look a little strange. So for us, we actually have to look not just at a single elephant. We don't even have the time now to look at one elephant. We actually have to better understand the very nature and the pattern of digital transformation. So imagine the elephant is changing right under our hands. We think we've grasped something, we're like, yep, we've got this. I understand what this trunk's going to do. Yep, got it. And then boom, it changes. Now, this is the point of the presentation. I said we're going to get a little bit technical, go into a bit of like architectural discussion. Anyone have huge objections if I do that? Because I've got a really ugly slide coming up. It's really ugly. Just going to warn you, it's ugly. No objections? Then I shall move on. All right, here we go. This slide here is one of the many slides you see from the world of architecture, technical, business, enterprise architecture. It's what it does try to do, and I like the fact they've pared it back and not made it look pretty. They're like, don't worry about what it looks like, look at the content. But what it's trying to explain is that at the very core of every business is this thing called an adaptive system. And by adaptive system, it indicates it's more like an organism now. It's really fluid. It's not like it was back in the 50s where, you know, we built cars or refrigerators and it was all very certain. It's more organic. And it flexes up and down and it's moving around. It has a heartbeat and all these types of strange things that are going on. Now, inside that adaptive system in that yellow square, here's a couple of, this is the weird stuff that's just going on inside the organisation. We've got external pressures, everyone wants to transform, amazing, great. But 47% of IT budgets in that system is going on maintenance. And if your organisation is old, the money is probably going on to old legacy systems. Only 26% will go on innovation, and a good proportion of that will be adapting and transforming a business to be more compliant and avoid risk. That's crazy. That's crazy when you think about it. 73% of businesses in Australia are now saying that they're using regenerative AI in some form. A lot of it's coming into the HR area. 73% seems crazy high, but, you know, there are statistics, and then there's, you know, damn statistics. But this idea that the system just the yellow square itself is sort of like, morphing and changing is a bit intimidating. But we've also got all these social changes going on. 95% of staff, they did a survey in America, granted, but they said about 95% of staff remain mentally open to new roles and new opportunities if things were offered to them. So everyone inside that yellow box is looking for the next hustle. So we can't even rely on that either. That's sort of moving as well. And the other, I think the other part that's terrifying everybody is this idea that cybercrime is now getting, excuse me, there's my flu. Cybercrime is now touted to get to 10.5 trillion annually next year. It's just taking over. Now, you'll just have to, 2 seconds, my friends. I am just going to open the questions tab. I'm hoping that works. Let's see how we go with that. How's that work? All right, and you're right. We just got a great little comment there about compliance should be definitely on here. Compliance is in some of the finance sectors, the total percent of the wage bill, just wage and HR compliance, is between 1 and 3.5% of the wage bill is just on like being compliant in Australia. Dollars on it. So there's a lot. There's just all this stuff going on inside of this yellow box, as we say. But separate to all of that, we've also got all these other external influences happening. And I think when I first saw this diagram, which would have been a long time ago, now I think about it, it was like, it sort of went, yeah, that sounds bad, ecosystem, yada, yada, yada. But what we've got now is this velocity that's happening, different business models, different, social awareness, all these things that are happening to us. So it is little wonder for us in this sector who might have skills around delivering projects and outcomes and deliverables that we're going, oh my God, let's just break this thing down. Let's just break it down to something manageable. And it is true, we do need to break things down. But the temptation is to sometimes be too simplistic. And that's where I think we see these failure rates. Now, skills are definitely a part of everything we do to get rid of this feeling. And I mentioned how we have to unlearn things. So I'm just going to take a little moment here just to make sure, just to add a little bit around the power of skills. And I'll do this and hopefully implore to you the importance of it by telling you my story. I found myself as head of transformation of one of the big banks in Australia, and I felt grossly underskilled. I felt the weight of trying to make good decisions. I had an MBA and I had all that, comp science, all that sort of like very traditional training. But I never felt confident that we were making the right decisions on things. And everything around like leadership, about inspiring and, burning platforms and all this stuff, none of it resonated with me because it didn't really fit this adaptive model that these things were moving and changing. It felt like to me we needed more logic and we needed to have more experiments and we needed to be able to provide confidence that we sort of vaguely knew where we were going and we were getting feedback from the adaptive system that, yeah, we look like we're on the right, we're on the right path. And it was at this point that I met Jay-Z. So does anyone here know Jay-Z? Like, the original Jay-Z, not the other Jay-Z. Yeah, he's alive, I think. This great guy here, I was incredibly fortunate to study under John Zachman, who is like the the grandfather of Jason says no, I don't know who he is. John Zachman, Google him. What he did, he was probably well before his time. He was a techo, he was an ex-IBMer, that way back then, he could see how these adaptive organisations, these sort of nebulous things and ecosystems were only going to grow. And we needed a system to be able to decompose a business in a way that would allow us to transform properly. And so he got into enterprise architecture. I'll throw some jargon in there. He was the guy behind the ontology movement. He did the whole labeling, lots of criticisms, lots of benefits, doesn't really matter. But what he did, he provided a solution to many of us in digital transformation that said an organisation needs to be seen as, one, adaptive. It also needs to be susceptible to moving forces at any given time. And for us as leaders or influencers within it, we need to fully embrace the idea of a true systems way of thinking. Like, if we move this, this thing will change. This will, that will, everything's interacted with it. Now, we got to a level of understanding as a digital team because we all, got skilled up and we were able to all, have our own language to be able to work properly. We weren't bluffing and talking rubbish to each other or what have you. We actually knew what we were doing. And what we were able to do in this, sorry about these transitions, we were going to take them out, but they should just make you laugh a bit. All right, what we were able to do in this digital transformation process, or is skilling up of it, is that we were able to look at a business at a moment in time and look at that elephant, being fully aware that elephant was transforming under our hands. And then we were able to look at it in a way that we said, all right, our 2B is going to be roughly this area, like just roughly. So we ended up with this idea of destiny more than strategy. And it sounds like it's a terrible name. It's something that was homegrown because we couldn't describe it any other way. We're like, and you can probably imagine talking to the CEO of one of the large banks that we needed a chunk of money for our destiny. We did edit that because it was sort of like an in-house word. But I think it was a good way to describe, honestly, that we didn't actually have the answer, like the real detailed answer of what it was going to look like, because the rate of change was a force itself. And that from the time we changed this thing was going to change, that was going to change. That assumption was already being moved by this other project. There was too much change going on. And for us to then be able to confidently look at that moment in time and then decompose it and then come up with a solution, we needed to have some principles to make sure that we felt what we were doing was better, on this destiny. And the big thing that we kept coming back to is that every substitute offering, every time we would change something or suggest a change in the current state, the substitute offering for that, so not just optimization, not just continual improvement, what is our substitute offering to get that outcome? We must be better than we are today. We must just be better. Now, that might sound like a ridiculously simplistic way to look at transformation and digital change and what have you, but it's not. This principle of it must be better was actually extremely difficult to maintain. And if anyone wants to comment on that, I'd be really, really keen to hear from that. I'm just quickly... Yes, it's from before, yeah. Yeah. I like this. Chanel says, with your background in data reforms, do you support the notion that sustainable DX is built on the foundation of reliable quality data, metadata? Yeah. Metadata, management of data should be one of the most forensically disciplined things that you start with. It's probably, I could talk about this for hours. Data in an organisation is as precious as accounting data. And a little bit of Aussie casualness here, but the sloppiness that we see businesses, the way they treat this really valuable resource and the naming conventions and the tolerance to confusion and then, everything that ensues with that is really a little bit surprising. But it is actually one of the major causes of why you end up in a pickle and you end up having to reform of your data. And the second part of that question, for those businesses who are rushed to meet the demands of digital trends, what would be your suggestion for their approach in structuring to help them with their continuous? What would be your suggestion for their approach to an organisation structuring data reforms to help them with their continuous data programs? My wish for you is that you get someone who understands the power of disciplined data management. Too many, it's a real patience game. It's forensic. It's boring. It's routine, and you need people who are advocates for high quality, because it is a foundation. They're actually the building blocks of your whole business. And when that's the perfect world. If you can find someone who has authority and says this is really important, and they're able to articulate that to people with authority and money to say it actually needs to be tidied up. Commonwealth Bank did it. They took about 5 years to do it. Back in the early 2000s, they spent a lot of money with no visible progress on top because they had a really strong CIO. But the other part of it, I think, is that you have to chunk it down. You will have to chunk down data into key areas. So maybe just pick the things that matter and then try to push it outwards on it. If I could also add to that, make sure you don't get into a culture where people start not telling the truth about data as well. You have to have a real transparent personality with it as well, and no judgment and no blame. It's probably a whole other conversation. All right, which just on the great question, thank you for that. But I just want to make a comment about using Agile within the world of digital transformation. Agile is awesome, right? Because it is all about experiments. You get into a hypothesis and you think, will this work? The overarching question should be, will it make it better? Is the substitute offering that we're putting forward, will our adaptive system be better? And if you can't answer it properly, you probably need to test it a little bit more. A whole lot of instruments in Agile that you can use to be able to make sure you're feeling a bit more confident towards your destiny. But small incremental changes in Agile that are not governed by good product design can lead to quite serious technical debt. And you can see this in Agile, some of the poor implementations of Agile where it's all about the post-it notes and feeling creative and all this type of stuff, and it doesn't have that highly disciplined design governance structure over the top. And what ends up happening is that you get these weird this adaptive system that has little bits that work and bits that don't work, and a business starts to lose its coherence. And when a business loses its coherence, you see the return of the silos. You'll get this weird thing called false positives, where reports will tell you one thing, but when you go out into the shop floor, you're looking at things, that doesn't work. You start to lose sight of things. And there's a lot of money, that $1 trillion that they're putting on digital transformation is in dealing with technical debt and trying to make sure that, we stay on track. Technical debt is very hard to undo, extremely hard to undo, but it does seem to be a little bit epidemic at the moment as well. So we've got all that. That's our little digital transformation world. It's growing, it's crazy. There's this all these adaptive systems going on. No wonder we feel disorientated when we go to work. And no wonder people like yourself, and I commend you for taking time out of your day to learn a bit, but it's no wonder some of us feel like imposters. I think it's good to feel like an imposter. I mean, I hated it. It drove me to go and study at night because I couldn't stand the feeling of not knowing what I was doing. But it means, good news is, friends, if you feel like an imposter now and then, chances are you're pretty smart. That self-doubt is not something that is recognised in people with low skills, because they go, oh, no, I'm fantastic, I'm awesome. High-achieving individuals know, or they sense in a pattern, there's something else that I need to know, or it doesn't feel right. It doesn't have the feeling of coherence. And if you ever study people like Edison or Tesla, they would all talk about this sort of weird feeling of going, it's not done yet. Speaking of done, one of my favourite models in the world, the Dunning-Kruger effect. So the Dunning-Kruger, which is hilarious. this is where people who aren't really great at what they do overstate their abilities. And they, you ask people who are a bit average, and you go, give yourself a rating of 1 to 10, how fabulous you are. And the people who aren't really great will go, oh, I'm a 9 out of 10. And the high performers will go, I'm probably a 4 out of 10, despite the evidence suggesting they're actually a high performer. It's this weird sense of humility, but there's also this desire to go, I know I can know more. So if you're feeling like an imposter in this complex world of digital transformation, I encourage you to stay at it, because that discomfort will drive you to be able to learn patterns more, go learn about architecture, be open, like sit and watch things a bit more and go, does this make sense? Is what we're doing going to make things better? And what happens as you're going through the Dunning-Kruger / resolving your imposter syndrome is that you may have started a project and you look at it and go, oh, I know it all. I'm amazing. I've seen this before. Oh, yeah, same old characters, same old project boards, same old. And you have quite a lot of, confidence. You don't have much knowledge about the intricacies of it. And I'm sure you in project teams may have met someone who's like that. They come in with all the swagger. I was a management consultant. I worked with people all the time with swagger. And they would just brim this confidence. And then there's something delightful as their knowledge starts to increase. They're like, oh, there's a lot more to this than I realised. This is where the cascading levels of detail sometimes gets us, you get tricked up on it. And the thing with digital design, it is like Google Maps. You can zoom out and you can get the satellite view of it, but you still have to get down to the street view to make sure it works as well. And that's what makes it such a unique part of the change sector. So you go through, you got this knowledge and you're going, oh, and your confidence starts to, drop. And then at some points, I can share with you, I remember doing this transformation and it was incredibly complex and I was that overwhelmed and I had such a desire to do a good job. And there were a lot of obstacles, as I'm sure all of you are familiar with. I used to cry on my way home. I'd drive home and it was like this little routine I'd do. I'd be like, oh my God. And then I'd, walk in the front door and I'd be fine. And I wasn't suppressing anything. It was just that this feeling of I don't know anything just got to me. And I let myself feel like that because I think it's actually pretty healthy to feel like that because it means that you're not pretending. And it was once I let that flow through, and then I've got a little action plan. My action plan consisted of me getting educated, skilling up, taking time out, investing more time than the 40 hours a week, just to learn about how these complex systems work. And I started to do this thing where I just would stare at a wall and I would let these complicated adaptive systems make sense to me. And I ended up mentoring a few consultants work for me, and I caught up with one a year ago. And he said to me, you know how you told me to stare at a wall? He's now head of risk and compliance at a large bank, funny enough. And he said, do you remember how you told me to stare at a wall? And I was like, yeah, I guess. And other gems of advice that I may or may not have imparted. He said it was one. He said, yeah, he goes, I do it now when I'm trying to figure out how risk and compliance works in these weird systems. I have to get into really deep thinking. And there's a sense of comfort that comes with you don't know it all, but it's starting to make sense. And I accept that it's complicated, not ambiguous, it's complicated because all these different things are all different currencies and they're all like playing off with each other. For me, I hated that feeling of just not having skills, and it definitely, I needed to go and learn, and I needed to master a few things just so I could actually feel good about what I was doing. I think this lack of confidence is a bit underrated as well, that comes with not knowing how to do your job. Many years ago, I read an article that said most people at work don't know how to do their job fully. And it does definitely lead to a real lack of confidence. I think it probably impacts our mental health. You feel like you're going to, sort of get caught out, or perhaps some behaviours come out that you're not proud of, where whatever it is, I cannot tell you how important it is just to have a few skills under your belt that you can just feel, confident. And when I look at this as an extract from the digital transformation course that PECB run, I think when you're looking at these five, these 5 areas of technology, the difference between looking at this and then just going, oh, we should do it, to be able to be really reflective and go, which of those elements within my business can I substitute with a technology like this that will make it better? It's a very different question, as rather than, oh, we can just plug it in and see how it goes, but to be reflective and think about the strategy and how the destiny of the organisation could be changed by us thoughtfully pushing this stuff through. And I think that's where we get this for-purpose digital design. It's a really, we start to go, okay, we've got purpose behind us. We've got a little central heartbeat. We know what we're going to do. We've got to work within risk and governance. Yeah, we've got some resources we've got to, we're going to get constrained by. But at the core of it, there's a sense of logic to what we're doing. And then we can actually interact with agile teams, and product owners a bit more aligned, and all of those good things that happen. But it becomes very purposeful. Digital design is one of those areas within this sector that drifts off really quickly away from its core purpose. Because let's be honest, it's a pretty sexy area. It's sort of fun. You get to play with AI, you've got a little chat bot, all those types of things. And it's pretty easy to abandon what our first principles are, which are we should be making things better. So I also wanted to put a slide in around ethical considerations with tech. This is becoming more and more of an issue in pretty much everything. This is probably the first time in my career I've seen ethical considerations being pushed up the list of, the criteria when we're looking at things. And I'll use it for example, remote working. We're being asked to be able to monitor staff. It's in the news, you only have to Google it, there's all these articles. Oh my God, my boss is like got a camera on, he wants to be able to see whether I'm working. Is that ethical? And I think for change people, we're getting more and more of these questions thrown at us. What are the ethics that sit behind it? Not the risk and governance, but what are the human ethics that sit behind it? AI, what are the ethical considerations? AI has a few issues with it. It's, it hallucinates. It's good for some things, it's bad for others. What is our future going to look like if we were to roll out AI across all our organisation? What will it do to our customers? How is this going to work? And I think for the first time in my career anyway, this has become a more and more thoughtful moment for us as digital and technologists to really be considering. And I would say many of us who might be thinking of it in private, this is where that imposter thing comes up. We're like, am I allowed to say this? Like, this seems so like grand. Should we even be raising this? And I think you should. I'm a nobody, but I really think we need to be having some very ethical conversations around the technology that we're rolling out everywhere. Now, well, a couple of little things around leadership, which I mentioned before. I found, despite having, years of the obligatory leadership and change management training and all that good stuff, I found in digital transformation and cleaning up and mopping up after people and dealing with some dreadful stakeholders, let's be honest, some dreadful people across the journey, is that so many things that you get taught in traditional leadership has to be abandoned, particularly stuff back that might be 10 years old now. We have to get rid of a lot of it. We have to unlearn it. One of them is gut instinct. In digital transformation, when we are doing substitute offering, and say we've got a pretty skilled team, digital team, we should be able to verify if intuitively that seems like a good idea. Great, let's test it. But the old executive gut instincts, they're so yesterday. They are high risk. They're very difficult for people to sign up to. But let's be honest, a lot of leadership training, a lot of stuff you see online is all about, follow your passion, follow your instinct and what have you. Not digital design, friends. No. We are like engineers. We need to see some evidence that this is going to work, not just for today, but for our elephant into the future as well. The other parts of leadership that I think that probably in digital world and in the world of to try to minimise this imposter feeling is the importance of being humble, not false humble where, the humble brag and that, but getting to that point, like in the Dunning-Kruger model where you go, I actually don't know it all. I have no idea. And it's not like a game where you're trying to make people like you or anything. You actually have to accept you don't know it all. And if those of you are a bit intelligent and you've got a little bit of a control thing going on, like I'm probably a bit like that, it is very uncomfortable to get humble. It's actually quite uncomfortable. And a lot of management systems, project management systems, try to drive it out of us. They want us to be controlling and, be like report and all those good things. But there's something about this sector that's different to others. The item 4 I wanted to just take a moment on. Sometimes when you're in the imposter syndrome and you're feeling like, you're in a corner and you feel like you're not probably the smartest person in the room and you think, oh my God, what am I doing here? Big characteristic of being an imposter. Depending on your predilection or the way your personality is, sometimes we accidentally bully. Now, bullying is not always that sort of loud yelling at someone or, harassing them. It might just be where you dismiss someone else's opinion. You might exclude someone from an important design meeting because they're just a pain to deal with. That all falls within the category of bullying. And I think sometimes when we're feeling uncomfortable ourselves about the legitimacy of whether we should be in here, we accidentally fall into some bad behaviours. Not saying we're bullies or anything, but I've certainly witnessed it. And I think I can think of one project where the stress got me. And it was a long reform piece for Defence Force. So lots of big personalities all yelling. And I got impacted. I was sort of like, like it's a tribal thing, right? Everyone's hanging out and they're all behaving the same. I wouldn't say I was bullying, but I certainly wasn't my best version of myself in terms of being collaborative. And this sector, because there are so many experts, so many blind experts in there, the opportunity for bullying and all that type of stuff is pretty high. It's pretty high because, if we all think we know it all and then we're just behaving badly, the whole thing becomes just a red hot mess. The last one, I'll just put ignoring the systems, the nature of a world. Yeah, don't do that. Just watch like world trends and all those things. But the last one is with the digital transformation world, people and being trustworthy and having those qualities is really hot. Paris Hilton hot. But it's being reliable and being trustworthy and transparent is not something we talk enough about at work to say, are you trustworthy? And I'm not talking about the not gossip or I'm not talking about any of that stuff. It's being grounded enough to be able to say, I think this one works, this one won't work, and letting people feel like they can trust you to be able to make the right destiny call on things. Now that is picked up in leadership training on lots of the old style leadership training about being grounded and, being trustworthy and what have you. But if there was an emphasis point when we're working in these highly collaborative environments, this one's probably higher up on it. I think it's really important. And it's hard though, if you're feeling like you legitimately shouldn't be there, it's hard to really show yourself up to go, hey, I'm feeling a bit weird. Still trust me. I'm not going to burst into tears or anything. I do that in the car. Not here to make anyone feel uncomfortable. But it's a sense of being human in a really good professional way. It's not oversharing. It's trying to find that nice balance between feeling a bit weirded out, feel like I'm maybe outside my comfort zone, but I'm going to give it my red hot best shot on it. So as we slide down, friends, just a couple of, we are going to do the infomercials. This is, PCB have got a really cool little digital transformation certificate. We really like it at MCBI because it's about quality and it's about certifying the individual. With so many people changing jobs these days and moving around, it's really important that individuals have the information, not just the people, not just the organisation. So you can actually go and become your own sort of library of knowledge, and it won't matter where you go. You've got these principles and these skills that are very practical, and you can use them anywhere on it. You know, you don't just have to be a Commonwealth Bank or ANZ for it to be useful. It's something that you can hold into your own little personal professional backpack. So that's it. We've got 5 minutes to go. Final thoughts. My final thoughts for you. The line between feeling like an imposter and being an imposter, because there is actually that case, you know, that very strong case that you actually are an imposter, it's driven by skills. It's 100% skill-based on, you know, it's okay to feel like it, but make sure you make some effort to close the gap so you're not an imposter or hanging in a project team where you're not really knowing what you're doing. Digital transformation is, I think, probably one of the highest risk parts of the business sector at the moment, but it's growing and it's required. We need to transform our businesses as much as we are changing society at the moment. We've got to do things better and we've got to do them differently. So you have big purpose in front of you. It's just really hard, and it's but I'm sure you're all up for the challenge. And never, ever assume you know it all, my dear elephant friends. That's it for me in terms of the formal part of the presentation. That wasn't too strange, but we will now open it up for questions. Hello. This is so funny when oh. I've got a couple of little comments here. Oh, Anthony says he loves my architraves. Well, thank you. You're in my kitchen, Anthony. So, yeah. It's not every day I get a compliment on my architraves. Yes. And Anthony has commented here, not all agile managers are created equal. Absolutely not. We do a lot of coaching in agile, and I think some of the hardest agile, you know, like people are the old PMBOK who are really, and no fault of their own, they have been built up, so to speak, around control, structure, earn value, don't trust anyone, make sure the burn rates are all like governed. And then agile has this sense of leaning into this adaptive system, and you're trying to cooperate with the system a bit. But it's a bit of a mental, yeah, it's mental change, yeah. And I just want to comment.
Hi, Marina. Carlos here.
Thank you. Thanks. Saving me there.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carlos King, and I'm the Associate Team Leader for APAC at PECB. First of all, thank you so much for the insightful presentation, Marina. It's been great. We received a lot of questions from our audience, and due to time constraint, I'll only be able to choose a couple to read out. So here's our first question. So Yun Choi here asks, thanks, I'm going through multiple items over softwares. Is there any tips? Best is to spread over the time?
Sorry, could you say that again? It just broke up a little bit. Software, was that?
Sure. Yeah. I will also leave it on the chat for you so everybody can see it as well. Just one moment, please.
Perfect. Thank you.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, do you see it?
Okay. I'm going through multiple items over software. So is that like you're using software or evaluating software. That might be.
Health and safety, accounting, HR, dot control. These are all the things changed over. System upgrades, Ian Choi said.
I'm sorry, it's not a great connection. I'm sorry, can you say that again? Sorry.
No worries, no worries. All right, let me put that on the chat as well.
Maybe it's I'm still a bit interested.
Sure, no worries, no worries.
Just to answer the software, there's an old, I mean, you probably already got it, but there's an old, so not only one, but there are many software the company wants to look at. Also evaluating software. Hopefully I've got that right. There's an old technique called function point testing or function point design with systems engineering. And essentially what it does, it breaks down what will be your functional requirements. So on your side, or business requirements, or all those items. And then you'd evaluate the software very, very harshly. You do it harshly against your functional areas, like what you need done. And then so that's a really cool question, but maybe Google function point design. But what you do is estimate complexity and time and cost against whether it's a pass or fail against your functional requirements. Then if you want to be really, really funky, you do like what it will look like now, and then you do a forecast in 5 years, if that makes sense. Because we know that most installations will hang around for about 5 years. So you got to see if it will age well as well. And point of sales and banks and all those, they're like 15, 20-year investments. So you can sort of do it. But function point, it's a really old system engineering technique, which is really cool. It's very impartial. I'm on LinkedIn too. So if you want to shoot me a note, I'll be happy to answer that. And I love this one. It's my personal thing. I have a manager who doesn't know much, but pretends to know. It's pretty difficult working with, yeah. Isn't it great when you actually get to work with an imposter? They don't even have the syndrome. They just are an imposter. Yeah. I don't have a lot of good advice on that. You can probably tell I'm a bit quality orientated. It's really hard how many folks, in our sectors like engineering, and you wouldn't build a bridge, you wouldn't get the Golden Gate Bridge up if you didn't have some people at the top who knew what they were doing. You're talking about concrete and stuff. Yeah, that's a hard one.
Thank you, Marina. So this is our next. No worries. All right, we have another question here from Hole saying, "Hi Marina, thanks. This has been great. I see from your LinkedIn that you are currently working in the NGO sector. What are the extra challenges and approaches needed for this sector? Thanks."
My favourite sector. Yes, I'm actually a director at Anglicare SA, which is huge not-for-profit, and the challenges. Wow. So for purpose, not like we were talking about it, but for purpose, where they act as an adjunct to society to help typically improve something in society, that we've never needed you guys as much as we do right now. But it is difficult, from my observation in this sector, it's grossly underfunded, the digital transformation area, grossly underfunded. And I mean, there's not lots of money in those sectors anyway, but if I use an example, the expectations of the aged, like say you're doing something in aged care, in 10 years' time, the 60-year-olds who are running around on cruises, or the 70-year-olds, are all going to be 80. It's going to take us 5 years to build tech for them, that's sort of mature enough. Their expectations of what tech's going to look like around security, usability, mobility, all of that stuff is going to be much higher than what we've got, all the legacy systems that are in place now. And I think one of the biggest issues is this huge gap around what the transformation needs to look like to service the community. It's massive, massive. I also think sometimes culturally, the pious, we don't have enough money, will underfund projects to the point where it risks up. The projects end up getting risked. They get too much risk in them because they're not funded properly. I think that's and everyone's like, oh no, she'll be right. You know, let's just stick this in here. No, she'll be good. And hopefully, if nothing else you get out of today, there are so many forces at play for us to do good design. We actually do need we need money or resources. Not money to waste it, but we need resources to be able to transform stuff. Lots and lots of issues in that sector, lots. The other big one is cyber, by the way. I'd say that they're a bit of a target, the not-for-profit sector, because they don't typically have really great fortressing up around their data. You know, they're mid-size, they're a big target. Yeah. That's going to depress me. I'm going to be...
Wonderful. All right. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us today, Marina. I also want to thank our audience for their participation. And as we wrap up, I'd like to remind everyone that a recording of this webinar will be available on our website shortly. So if you have any more questions or feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out to PECB. So once again, thank you, Marina, and then thank you to everyone who joined us today. Have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.